In 146 BC, Rome stands undefeated. Their rivals have been eliminated, like going to Carthage. They wiped it out. They lifted the ancient curse. Remember Dito's curse. Everything Carthaginian is gone. Philosophy, culture. And Rome is now in Greece doing the same thing. They've wiped out Corinth and taking the haul, the war booty. It's staggering. I'll show it to you. But while the Roman legions are breaking things and winning, they are creating the Roman Republic's most dangerous moments. How? I've already given you one clue. Consider all the war loot, not just the treasures, but the newly enslaved Greek populations that are getting shipped back to Rome. Ask yourself, why is there so much Greek stuff everywhere? Did the Greeks actually take over the Romans? I'm Mr. Hull, and this is Classical Kingdoms. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where history reveals truth and wisdom. For your journey, we take a classical approach to history. Why the ancient Roman Republic still influences us today. So in this lesson, you can understand how Rome's conquest of Greece around 146 BC fundamentally transforms the Roman Republic. And you'll see what that means. It's a collision of power and culture. And it connects to the timeless truths that still influence our country today. I like the quote by Horace. He says, "Captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror." Let's begin. In the middle of the 2nd century BC, Rome is looking at a lot of wins, and Hannibal's gone out of the way. You may think life is good, Dito's curse has been lifted. But if you're coming here from lesson 46, you remember the Second Punic War did not go well. And Rome faces a variety of consequences. But they have another invasion going on. Since lesson 37, we've been building up the Hellenistic ideas, the Greek ideas that were being spread by Alexander the Great and his legacy. The Romans are now looking right down the middle at it, and it's splitting them right down the middle. They have a cultural civil war going on. Let's go to the Senate. On one side of this cultural divide in the Senate is Cato the Elder. Marcus Porcius Cato, not to be confused with Cato the Younger, his grandson, who we'll see in future lessons. But he's the embodiment of the old Roman virtue. He was a farmer. He loved his cabbages. He gave us a lot of nutritional information. He wrote a book about cabbages. He ran his farm well. He showed that the Roman ideals of hard work and working the land, that's the Rome. That's the old ways of Rome and emphasizing efficiency and profit and running things well and brutally good resource management. Also in the military. After he plants his cabbage, he went off to fight. He was strong and successful. He wanted no waste, no luxury, no weakness. It's kind of a hardcore austerity idea that Cato represents in the Senate. What is austerity? Austerity is a strictness, being stern and basic and no nonsense. And he believes that is part of the Roman ideals. And so when he says Carthago delinda est, Carthage must be destroyed, he's talking more than just the city, the influence that Carthage is so Greek, Carthage is so Mediterranean, and they're going to undermine Rome. So when Cato was commanding troops in Spain and in Greece, Cato would make sure that everyone saw he drinks cheap Roman wine. With the oarsmen, with the slaves, the same cheap Pasca. Pasca. What is Pasca? It's one of they would mix water into kind of concentrated wines that they carried around. This one was more vinegar wine. Very cheap. because other generals are indulging themselves in the wonderful Greek wines and Greek luxuries. Cato shamed them, shamed the aristocracy. Luxuria was a weakness. Cato the Elder was censor in 184 BC, and Cato levied punitive taxes on Greek luxury items. The beautiful women's jewelry, the expensive clothing coming from Athens, the Greek decadence, it all had heavy luxury taxes. He tried to expel senators for moral laxity because they were enjoying lavish Greek treats. He's trying to legislate morality himself. Cato didn't just like Greek culture, he viewed it as an existential threat to Rome, to the old Roman ways. And his specific warnings went to his son Marcus. On Greek literature, he taught, when the race gives us its literature, it will corrupt everything. That race, the Greeks. Cato said it's okay to look into the Greek writings, but you are not allowed to thoroughly study them. And he prophesied that Rome would lose its empire, lose its power, if they were infected with Greek letters. Spoiler alert, Rome reaches its zenith during its most Hellenistic period. And you know, there's Greek stuff everywhere. Cato was so paranoid about Greeks, Greek physicians, he would never hire, even though the Greeks invented medicine, with the Hippocratic Oath, with the Asclepion, the healing centers. Cato believed that Greek doctors swore a secret oath to murder the Romans, barbarians, with their medicine practices. And the fees that they charged were just to make them look like they knew what they were doing, to avoid suspicion. Cato's words were, "I forbid you to deal with Greek doctors. They have conspired among themselves to murder all of us, the Romans, with their medicine." That's a quote. Is that too much paranoia for you? Well, maybe it's helping his cabbage business because of his book that told you just eat cabbage and you'll be healthy. Roman Ways. He's a politician. He even disses Socrates. He dismisses him. Just a mighty prattler. Violent revolutionary that seeks tyranny by overturning customs, questioning everything. So Cato the Elder is the guardian of austerity, the old Roman ways, and a prophet of doom. Does this sound like anything we have in today's world? Someone that's this much of a messenger against something as widely accepted? He says that Greek culture is a poison that is destroying everything that Rome built. So let's explore that. On the other side of things, we've got Scipio. We could call it the Scipionic Circle because historians call it that. The people that don't agree with Cato. They're going to oppose him in the Senate. They're going to oppose him in this cultural war. It's aristocrats, the ones that like Greek things, and intellectuals who like Greek philosophy. And it's named after the Scipio. So remember Scipio Africanus, his son Scipio Aemilianus, Scipio Africanus Minor, the young Scipio Africanus, who was there for the final destruction of Carthage in the Third Punic War. The Third Punic War was kind of a cleanup event, a mopping up, where they just did extreme things to end Carthage altogether, even plowing salt into the fields. Scipio Africanus Minor is a young guy and promoting this advanced culture, the Greek culture. Scipio says that Rome could be ennobled by the Greek culture. What is ennobled? To be made noble, to be leveled up, that Rome is not as advanced. Greece had such a head start. and all the Hellenism and all of what Alexander the Great did. So could Rome be ennobled and leveled up to a noble status? Scipio himself was actively cultivating Greek learning and philosophy. He brought two famous Greek experts with him everywhere. A Greek historian, Polybius, the Stoic philosopher, Plantations. They were at his side all the time, even on military campaigns. So when Scipio was laying siege to Carthage and planning how to destroy it, he was debating, during break time about the ideal states with the philosophers. Polybius was a Greek hostage that was brought to Rome and now has become Scipio's mentor, foremost historian of this time period for the Roman rise, Polybius. Polybius helps explain Rome's success through the Greek measurement and intellectual framework and how to do things the right way. Polybius is like a bridge. Plantations of Rhodes, the Stoic philosopher who really made this the top philosophy of the Roman elites, the Roman aristocrats. Stoicism teaches one core idea that you control your mind, not external events. The world will give you chaos, disease, and betrayal, but you can't control that. You control how you respond to that. In lesson 61, you'll see the last good emperor, Marcus Aurelius. He was a Stoic philosopher, still popular today as a Roman leader. He wrote a lot of Stoic philosophy. He said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. To call someone Stoic, for the most part, that's a compliment. You're strong. So the Scipionic circle, all these people, you could roll this into humanitas, human nature, and we would call it today humanities. And they really value the Greek paideia, the way these humanities, the education, the upbringing, the moral refinement, how it all goes together. Paideia, the humanities. You're cultivated, you're well-rounded, you're civilized, you're noble, benevolent, virtuous, and you can still be Roman. You don't have to be Greek with all of this. So that's what Scipio would say. Cato would not say that, right? The Romans could be powerfully masculine without being savage if they took on the humanities. And you could be fully educated without being effeminate or weak. So these are two different visions. It's a cultural divide. Is it the humanities and Roman virtus, the virtues, or is it the soil and the cabbage head of Cato? That be austere, be basic, and don't take outside influences that will wipe out your originality, that will wipe out what Roman Republic was supposed to start at. But this is a perfect time in a classroom, in a setting with kids that want to discuss this. It's like how a civilization would understand success, or a culture or a group. Like, kids pretty much want well-rounded success. You don't want to be one-dimensional. For the most part, we've all accepted this idea. We're not really on Cato's side, are we? Maybe? That's the question. So, can Rome conquer Greece without being conquered by Greece in this different way? So, type in a comment, what is your favorite Hellenistic element? Are you well-rounded, or do you go with Cato? Are you on Cato's side? And say why. Time to comment, and press the like button if you haven't done that, and subscribe. ClassicalKingdoms.com is a great platform where all of these lessons are part of a complete ancient history course. So 146 BC is a busy year. We've got a lot of events leading into the annihilation of Corinth. So let's go back a little bit to understand Corinth's destruction was not a calculated strategic necessity. It was punishment. Why? It's a statement. Why? Why does Rome need to make this statement? They were provoked. What brought this on? Corinth led the Achaean League, the federation of Greek city-states in the Peloponnese was the Achaean League, south of the Macedonians, and this Roman hegemony, the Roman influence of authority, it wasn't so strong and official. It was not welcomed by the Greeks, though. They really wanted full independence. They did not want any part of this Roman hegemony, this Roman authority that seemed to have so much power. So Rome would prefer that Greece be fragmented, not united, not having the Achaean League and just let them all be independent and fall under more and more Roman authority. And that's a classic divide and conquer tactic that the Romans were good at. So they're working on this. And so when Roman ambassadors arrive in Corinth to try to do their job, to try to divide and conquer, to break the authority of their Achaean League, guess what? Word got out, Roman ambassadors are coming. So the mob had even a leader, General Critolaus. The mob came out against the Romans, this populist anti-Roman faction, fired up the mob, and these Roman ambassadors, these envoys, were taunted. They were threatened. And you don't do that to ambassadors. Like when you are in the diplomacy, you're sacrosanct. And here is the worst part of it. They were pelted with filth. What kind of filth? In the ancient world, ambassadors are not going to have taunts and threats, and especially they're not going to have feces, waste. It's a supreme breach of diplomatic immunity. We call it diplomatic immunity, being sacrosanct. You don't mess with ambassadors, which will remind you of how Sparta and Athens both, when the Persian ambassadors came, they got thrown off a cliff or thrown into a well. So it makes history if this happens. And these ambassadors have been messed with, they've been harmed, and it's considered an attack on the gods, the ultimate taboo. So the Roman Senate, not going to have it. This is insulting. It's actually a declaration of war. It's enough to fire up the Senate. So they send Mummius. Mummius, Consul Lucius Mummius, is going to lead this punishment expedition, invade Corinth, and negotiations are over. These diplomats, they took one for the team, but it's now time for the wrath of the Romans. This decisive battle outside of Corinth, Corinth's authority in this league, the battlefield at Leucapetra, the terrain around Corinth is really exciting. I love taking students to the top, the Acro Corinth, this fortress area that would have overlooked this battlefield, just kind of down below, as you can see from this map. But Mummius, with the 23,000 infantry and 3,500 cavalry, plus archers from Crete and the Pergamum allies. So Rome has all kinds of friends. The Greek defense, General Diaeus, he only had 14,000 infantry and 600 cavalry. But at home field advantage, right? Some troops were freed slaves. Ooh, isn't that a sign of desperation, though? Are the Greeks underdogs here? The battle began with a surprise Greek attack at night against the Romans, and it was successful. Middle of the night, and Romans were being careless, so the Greeks were emboldened, and they went strong on the offense, even though they were outnumbered. But by morning, the cavalry decides it. The outnumbered Achaean horsemen, 600 versus 3,500. They broke and fled immediately upon the Roman charge. The Achaean infantry, the Greeks, the phalanx was exposed. The flanks were exposed. They fought bravely. they get some credit, but 1,000 Romans were able to strike the flanks. Thanks to the cavalry, it was a total rout. The Greeks fell apart. So you think they would retreat up to the Aqua Corinth. Corinth has this incredible fortress with all kinds of wall systems. By now, the original ancient walls have been added to. This should have been a place. And that's really what the Romans expected. It's a big, tall limestone rock, like 1,800 feet above the sea level, which you can see the bottom. It is one of the favorite spots on tour. We get our bus all the way up there, which the bus drivers hated. It's not the road for a big, huge tour bus. But as soon as the doors open, kids would just run out and start to climb up and explore the top. So why aren't we going there now? Because if you control this, it means you have the best strategic fortress out on this narrow isthmus and trade center. And you would access the Peloponnese by going past it. And the water supply. The spring of water, fresh water, like it means that you can withstand an indefinite siege, blockade, right? But the Greeks don't. The retreat meant that they ran south. After losing this battle, even the leader, Diaeus, they try to escape south into the Peloponnese. And Diaeus later commits suicide, just thinking it's all over. And nobody is guarding Corinth at this point. No, the city gates are open. Mummius thinks it's a trap. It can't be this easy. Mummius suspects a trap and waits 3 days before entering the defenseless city. But Corinth falls, and it's a psychological punishment that the Romans inflict. So Lucius Mummius has his win. What does he do next? Brutally efficient, like a blunt instrument, he is going to wipe this place out. He kills all the men, no exceptions. Women and children were sold into slavery. Slavery is going to be really huge with the Romans. It's a big part of their money-making. These slave markets, Romans are going to move from this Corinth slave market over to Delos and set it up on the island of Delos. All these Corinthian captives. And loot the city. There are a lot of treasures. Send them back to Rome. Set the place on fire. Dismantle this wall system as best they can. The Roman Senate decrees that this site will be uninhabited and it will be publicus, ager publicus, public land. And I don't get this part at all. Like, this is such an amazing and strategic place that we're going to have to wait until Julius Caesar is rebuilding and recognizing the importance and the strategic advantage of this. So, spoiler alert, the Romans will make Corinth into one of the 5 best cities in the Mediterranean. Other objects going back included acoustic vases, the scientifically designed vases that help actors project their voices in the theater. The Romans don't know what this is. And they're beautiful. They're shipping them back. Maybe they're being exposed to the beauty of these objects for the first time. Some of these Roman soldiers may not be the educated people that you are, and recognizing the beauty. What do Romans know about beauty? Well, they're going to be knowing a lot more about this. And we see Mummius maybe is converting a bit. On his way back to Rome, he dedicates some of the spoils into the Greek sanctuaries like Olympia and Epidaurus. And back in Rome, so Greek temples, Roman temples, he is dedicating some of these prizes that he's got and spreading the Greek culture himself. Now, back to the human cost of it. Enslavement is really driving an economic transformation right now for the Romans. Rome established Delos as the free port replacing the commercial trade of Corinth. And Delos, the Greek island, beautiful place, becomes the top slave trade center. How many slaves a day would you guess? You could also type it in the chat if you want to try to get this one right. You'll be amazing. 10,000 slaves a day. This is huge. That is now spiked because of the Romans winning across the Mediterranean, and really impacts the economy and the wealth of Rome. Seems like times are good, right? Wealthy Romans are able to purchase these slaves for really rock bottom prices. And why is that important? When the price of slaves so cheap, it means that buying land is more affordable. So remember, we mentioned the Second Punic War didn't go well. There were many consequences and farms were ruined. People were selling their farms for very cheap prices, and the Roman senators, the wealthy patricians, they were buying. Because slaves were so cheap now, they could run plantations with slaves. Does this sound familiar? What is Cato going to say about the traditional Roman farm, the backbone of the Republic? It's being displaced now by these plantations. They're called latifundias, plantations with slaves, and now the former hardworking farmers are moving to the cities, trying to take any job that they can. It's a demographic shift, and it's especially impacted by the events of 146 BC. The wealth, the slaves. So could you see anything wrong that might happen from this? Coming in the next lessons, the Gracchi brothers, the Marius. Yes, coming in lesson 48. So Mummius has a big win, but they don't realize that this could help the Greeks actually take over the Romans. And in the process, they're creating an economic situation with the farming in Rome. What about language? If the Romans are winning everything, shouldn't Latin be the language? I guess it is in the West, in Gaul, today France, Hispania, that's Spain, North Africa, Carthage. Those places all adopt Latin as the lingua franca. What is lingua franca? The international language, the one we can all understand. And that makes Romance languages, Rome-based languages like French, and for the Gauls, Spanish for Spain, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. That's the influence of Latin. But in the East, they don't do it. They don't take Latin. It stays Greek, where Alexander the Great had conquered in Asia Minor, Greece, of course, Egypt. That whole Hellenistic world is influenced by Greek, Koine Greek, and they don't adopt Latin. Have you heard of the Jirecek line, the linguistic reality that still really matters today, was mapped out by Jirecek. He drew a line in 1911. He's a Czech historian, Konstantin Jirecek. The theoretical boundary that shows the Balkans and kind of splits them into two spheres based on Latin, based on Greek. And this matters because it almost predicts a future fracture. Should this empire, this Roman Empire, ever break, would it break on the language line, on the Jirecek line? So north of the line, as you can see on the map, shows us why Romance language like Romanian development, Latin. And to the south, it's Greek. And in future lessons, when we see the Byzantine Empire, that is the Roman Empire of the East, and the strength of the Greek Hellenistic legacy. Back to Corinth, you think, since it was completely wiped out for a time, and Julius Caesar will put it back together and make it a new Roman city and make it Latin, it doesn't change the Greek heritage. And it helps us understand the break in religion, the break in the political line, the Byzantine Empire, and why Romania is a Latin language, but everything to the south is not. And Romance languages, you should remember in class, this was always a challenge. Very few kids could name Romanian as a Romance language. Spanish, that was easy. Italian, French, they would forget Portuguese. But the influence of the language goes back to this time. How do these 146 BC conquests reorganize the political map? The Mediterranean world that's being ruled more and more by the Romans. Well, let's look at three major provinces that are going to be formal. First, the province of Africa. That's where Carthage has been completely wiped out. The Third Punic War ended with salt being plowed into the fields of Carthage. So Rome will now deal with North Africa, Numidia. Rome will establish Utica as the capital because Utica sided with Rome during the Punic War. Of course they did. Another province, Asia. Asia is just a province. It's amazing that both provinces are going to be so impactful that the name will stick for the entire continent. So Asia, we're going to see Pergamum, the kingdom of Pergamum, get to be the capital of Asia. You're thinking, I thought it was Ephesus. Well, later, Ephesus will get to be the capital. But King Attalus III was loyal, right? He's the guy that bid 600,000 denarii for that painting and didn't get it. He was so loyal to the Romans, he bequeathed his entire kingdom to Rome. So he died in 133 BC. His will said, I give it to Rome. Pergamum will become a very important provincial capital. And that really means he's leading everything in Anatolia, in Asia Minor, that entire area. And third, the Romans already had Hispania, where we get Spain. So that entire Iberian Peninsula in Roman control. This is big. I mean, this is huge. It's all corners. It's not every classical kingdom, by the way. So there is a lot of detail we're skipping over, but we see from this lesson, Rome has filled up the map, which is encompassing our sea. Our sea, we call it the Mediterranean Sea, which is Latin middle of the world sea, Medi Terra. They called it our sea, or like our lake, Mare Nostrum, our sea, Mare, the sea. Nostrum is our, and together we control it. It's surrounded by lands that we control. And after 146 BC, the sea, our sea, if you were a pirate, good luck with that, because there's a new boss in town stretching from the east to the west, but there will be pirates. And we're going to hear about some in just a few lessons coming soon in lesson 51, some very famous pirates Julius Caesar had some problems with, but I digress. The sea is no longer a wild frontier or a shared space. It is Roman property, so don't mess around. It is surrounded by a single power, the Romans. What do you get from that? Taxes. They tax the farming, they tax the activities, they tax the trade, they've got the slave trade. And so it's bringing money to Rome. It's creating safety for everyone to travel and trade. So more trade, more economic activity is going to happen. Wealth is going to grow. And if wealth grows, let's follow the money, always. Corinth and Carthage, their destruction wasn't just about rivalries and securities. It's about creating the Roman market, the taxation zone that the Romans control, economic systems that can extract wealth from everybody inside this map. Does that make sense to you? Do you get it? What really happened in 146 BC? Do you think that the Greeks have taken over Rome? Rome sounds so powerful. They've really got control of the map. But the Romans don't have the single culture that Alexander the Great had. Back to the original question about the Roman Republic, the power, the success. But why is there so much Greek stuff? Did the Greeks actually win? Honestly, it's a yes and a no. I mean, no, because the Romans controlled all of the east and the west and all the water in between. Maybe Alexander the Great could have done that, but he died so soon. But the influence of the Greeks, it's really significant. And think about Cato the Elder. Do you agree with what he was warning about? Protecting the old Roman ways, and that the Greek culture and Eastern wealth would fundamentally alter Rome. Well, he was right. That part's the yes. But this is how the world works, the free market of ideas. It still happens today. Our Western civilization, very much built on all of the very best from the past, we're using Latin alphabet letters still today. So good job, Rome. But government and philosophy and so many scientific discoveries, good job, Greece. It's a true blend of classical kingdoms from Alexander the Great's vision and now from the new Roman vision, philosophy, art, and the humanities, humanitas. Rome evolved from being just muscle, the predatory state, into universal civilization, a map that connected everybody, and it's a diverse world that they can unite. And everybody, Lingua Franca, they could speak Latin and Greek, or one or the other. It would work. Rome imported Greek philosophy and created Roman law. They imported Greek art and created public beauty and better spaces. They imported Greek education and created the smart ruling class that could manage this huge empire. So just a warning into our next lesson, we've got some problems with the plantations worked by slaves. If you predicted that was going to be a problem, the generals who command armies may not stay loyal to the states. So some things may be changing, but from the story that we started with, the destruction of Corinth and Carthage, the rivals are gone. But Horace had the quote that we really like: captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror. Rome won the war, but Greece won the peace. Ironically, Corinth, the Corinthian column, becomes the Roman favorite. Roman temples, government buildings. And what about our government buildings? Look at the U.S. Capitol building, Corinthian columns, the Roman architecture. And look at the Supreme Court. It's Roman governance structured by Greek political theory, Roman architecture, Greek columns. And it's kind of why I've dedicated my career teaching this material. You know, the power and the culture, the blend of it. It's kind of a short story. It's the human story. It seems like thousands of years is a lot, but it makes our story part of Rome's story a little bit, in pursuing truth and goodness and beauty. The Rome-Greece merger was important for our Western civilization. Sorry, Cato, the cabbage head. I think you lost that argument, but thank you for your service in the Senate, and thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters in all of history. And that includes your journey, because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.